As y'all know, I'm a big fan of amplifying and elevating awareness about exceptional local and state politicians, those people that are actually doing the work. And part of that is that I can convince all of you to focus and run in some of your state, local, and municipal races. But there's a delegate from the state of Maryland. His name is Jeffrie Long, Jr. I recently got to meet him and to know him, and he is just a spectacular person that has a wonderful story to share about being one of the first Gen Z members of the Maryland General Assembly. But he also shared an incredible and disturbing story about a house of reformation, as it was called, for Black boys in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries. And it really was a house of horrors, and how it's impacted the Prince George's County where he's from, where Jeff is from, how it's impacted that community, and how there's a burial site there, a potter's field, if I may, with more than 200-something boys who were buried there with no fanfare and some with no knowledge or no information being given to their families. It's truly a horror story, and one that Jeff is investigating and getting down to the truth about. And I wanted to have this conversation and share it with all of you. So take a listen. And joining me now is Delegate Jeffrie Long, Jr. Look, Jeff, I'm pretty impressed. The first Gen Z members along you and Joe Vogel for the Maryland General Assembly. Talk about what that path was like, because there is, I think, some exceptional Black excellence that is coming out of that state of Maryland right now.
It was amazing. Joe and I were elected at the same age. He is 2 months younger than me. I'm November of 96 and he is January of 97, but I'm still the youngest Black member in the General Assembly. I believe one of the youngest Black lawmakers in Maryland and the country. But I was elected at 25 years old. And it's hard to believe that my first term is almost up and we're gearing up for re-election right now. But our country and our state, we are in dire need for new leadership, young leadership, folks that have lived experiences, but also people are eager and crying out for fresh blood and fresh talent, with an eye on the future and a great pulse on what's happening in communities around. And so that was really the impetus for what led me to want to get into public service, and especially given all the Black excellence that we see right now in Maryland. We have the largest Black caucus, or one of the largest Black caucuses in the country. So we have 67 members. We are 67 members strong. And I love our governor. He's a very dear friend, Governor Moore, doing a wonderful job at it. Lots of jobs to the economy, pushing back against some of the rhetoric that comes from the far right. But not just him. We have a Black state treasurer. We have a Black attorney general. We have a Black Speaker of the House, who is the first woman and the first person of color. Various committee chairs that oversee taxes and revenue, gaming, all the issues that really affect Marylanders of all walks of life are led by people of color. And so I'd put Maryland up against any state when it comes to our diversity and how we get it right time and time again.
Jeff, what do you say to somebody who says, how can a 25-year-old, because you mentioned lived experiences, right? What if somebody says, how can a 25-year-old, maybe it's fresh blood, new blood, but how can they actually have the perspective that maybe speaks to some of the issues that the older generations might be looking at?
Well, I'm a pastor, for those that know me. I am also a man of faith, and being raised by my grandparents primarily, my late grandfather who passed in March, he was 93 years old, member of labor, hardworking man, taught me how to work and to provide for myself and one day a family. My grandmother, 89 years old, I've seen her work up until she was 80. I've seen my parents struggle to put my sister and I through school. I've seen my grandparents struggle to figure out how to afford their insulin. I've seen them swap insulin. I've seen them swap medicine. And so this generation that we're in right now, time is progressing pretty rapidly. And so young people are being faced with challenges that prior generations may have not had to encounter. We've lived through a pandemic, especially Gen Zers. And I'm a millennial and Gen Zer because I'm November 96. So I have the best of both worlds, I feel like. But we've lived through a pandemic. We've lived through 9/11. We've lived through the insurrectionists in chief. We're living through that again a second time. And so I wouldn't discount anyone just because we are in our 20s. We're having to grapple with the rising cost to be able to afford to buy a home or rent, rising cost of groceries, people who are starting families, parents who are aging in place, taking care of aging parents, and just trying to do life and figure life out in a changing culture that is constantly changing day after day. And so I would always push back against that rhetoric that folks in my generation lack the lived experiences.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, the constituents that I serve, the seniors and those who are much older, are so impressed because they see their son or they see their nephew, they see their grandson in me. And then they're able to have a sense of trust, and they place that confidence in me to represent them well and to serve them well.
My subscribers here, my followers on social media, they know that I'm on a mission to uplift, highlight, amplify, and urge people to run for state and local municipal politics. There has been a shift. We've seen people that have been serving in Congress that have said, you know what, I want to come back and I want to serve as a governor, for example. I recently had Mikey Sherrill on, and, we see people like my good friend David Jolly, who's running for governor of the state of Florida, where I am based. He was a congressman for a while as well. Talk about why your role as a delegate, Jeff, in Maryland, representing your district, why it's so important for us to be paying attention to your position and these races that are going on across the United States right now.
I was recently at the Congressional Black Caucus, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett said it herself. She said, listen, I know folks want to automatically give and donate to races like mine because they see it put in the headlines. It's much more national. The focus is put there, but decisions on school policy, school boards, decisions on election certifications locally, decisions on zoning, all those things are taking place at the local level. How our congressional maps are drawn right now, it takes place in our state legislative chambers. And so fortunately in Maryland, we had a supermajority as Democrats, so we control the chamber. So we're able to make sure that we have fair maps, and we're not seeing occurring here in our state what has happened in Texas and what may take place in Missouri and whatever else Trump wants to do. But all politics are local. It is local. And uniquely enough, in my district, I have half Prince George's County and half Calvert County. And so it is a very unique compare and contrast, because in Prince George's County, it's predominantly African-American. In Calvert County, President Trump won it by 90%. And so I had that northern slither. And so I have to balance two competing jurisdictions with two different forms of government, two different interests. We have a right-wing extremist school board takeover happening in Calvert County right now, where I'm
Sounds
from.
familiar. Sounds familiar. Yep. Moms for Liberty down here has been trucking along. Yep.
I mean, literally pushing out qualified women, qualified men, qualified people of color that were candidates that have students in the school system, smear campaigns, attacks. And so we are now having to, on the state level, put these boundaries and parameters and guidelines in place to make sure that the policies that these right-wing extremists want to uplift don't infiltrate themselves into the minds of our young people, especially in this age of information, this age of technology, where it's already hypersensitive. And so we have a lot to combat against, and that happens on the local level.
Jeff, one of the things that I wanted to speak with you about today, in addition to your role in Maryland state politics, is something that you brought to my attention and others from one of your social media accounts recently. And I was so appalled when I read the accompanying article that was in the Washington Post about it. And I wanted to do a deeper dive with you and have an important conversation, because I suspect that what you and I are about to talk about is not only going to shock the conscience of people that are listening and tuning in, but I also sadly suspect that this has gone on in other places across the United States, but has escaped notice and recognition and attention because they don't have people like you that care enough to want to elevate and amplify it. And I want to talk to you about this. So this is the House of Reformation and Instruction for Colored Children. You talk about Prince George's County. That's where you represent, that area where this, we'll call it a cemetery in quotes, right, Jeff, for now, but it was a state juvenile detention facility in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, where at least 230 children died while in the care of that House of Reformation. The former DJS, the Department of Juvenile Safety Secretary Vincent Schiraldi, said, quote, "It's not just robbing them of their personhood while they were in our care and custody, but even after death, because we found out that these House of Reformation officials forced these poor children to sow crops in cane chairs while leasing them to local farmers. And that these Black boys arrived in 1873 at the beginning. They were sent there by judges to learn, quote, order, while under the supervision of a former Civil War general. And it was a privately run institution that was supposed to be an alternative to sending kids to prison. But in the end, it was a pattern of mistreatment, overcrowded rooms with no ventilation, boys underfed and left in disease-breeding conditions, and abuse by facility staff." It gives me the chills to read this, and I'm going to link the article in this video to the Washington Post article. But Jeff, I want to talk about this because it's horrific, but I suspect, like I said, this has happened in other places.
It's happening all over the country, and we're discovering it even more so now. There are other examples in Maryland, and I can't take the credit for finding and discovering the cemetery initially. And honestly, I refuse to call it a cemetery until it's treated like one. It's really a mass burial site. A colleague of mine, the chair of our Black Caucus, actually sent the article to me when the Washington Post was doing some investigation and wanted to get comments. And again, I represent this area. I live 4 miles away from where this burial plot, this mass burial site is. And it's actually behind a state operated veteran cemetery where those who have served our country, who were Maryland residents, are laid to rest. Again, it's a parallel. In the 1870s, it was a house of refuge for those that were white, but a house of reformation for color. See the difference in word.
Oh, okay. So wait, so white kids would go to the House of Refuge, but the Black kids were sent to the House of Reformation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And just for acts as minor as vagrancy or running away from home, or as records show, being incorrigible. And so we witnessed this. And one account, I read some articles, and there was a family that came looking for their son. And then as they were looking for the whereabouts of their son, they were told that he ran away. And one of the survivors from the House of Reformation actually told reporters then that he had dug the grave for that young man earlier that day. And so I think what strikes me the most is we've known about this in our state for quite some time. It's been passed down through folk tales, passed down through local community leaders, but there's not been this mass awareness. And then for those who were in a position of authority and power to actually do something about it, nothing has ever been done. And so the Black Caucus, we took a visit out a couple of weeks ago. And I'm very grateful that the governor's office has committed to give us some money towards GPR, which is ground penetrating radar.
Okay.
And we believe that there could be so much more lying beneath the surface. It's about 230 graves that we have discovered just through archives and records thus far. But who else knows what lies beneath the surface? And strikingly enough, to know that it happened in Prince George's County, which is the richest Black county in the country. And there are folks in the community that don't even know the history that they're living around, living beside. And so my office, because it's where I live, it's my community, my constituents, I want to make sure that people drive by, we properly memorialize what took place and what happened. And we bring dignity to young men that were treated in such an undignified manner.
Yeah, and I want to clarify and paint a little bit of a more detailed picture. This is pretty much a potter's field. It's unmarked graves. We don't know any type of humane treatment that was given to the remains, to the bodies of these young boys.
Right.
I hear you say that the quote crime could be something being incorrigible, which frankly would define you and me and people that we know. I noted in one of the articles you spoke to how community buy-in and input so important to you, because not only could there be ancestors or relatives of people that live in Prince George's County that have boys that had been, that were killed and that were there, right? But that, this, to your point, is a part of the fabric of that community where this burial site is located.
Correct. And honestly, to be very honest, a lot of those young men also did come from Baltimore City as well, and were sent to the only colored facility for colored boys during that time period. But there could be so many missing links to people's families' histories, a missing puzzle, a piece, a question, something unanswered. And so we want to be very thoughtful and thorough in our process. There's always conversation about what kind of action we can take what action we can take now to right some of the wrongs. And I think that this is a right step in the right direction to right some wrongs of the past and to bring closure to that very dark period. But, to be very honest, people are trying to erase history right now.
That's right.
And as ugly as it is, history is history. And I want to make sure that people are aware of what happened, that these young men, they were a human being. They had life. They had a future. I look at a grave. One young man was as young as 16 years old. For those that will read the article later, when you look and you see that some were so small that they could fit through prison bars themselves. And this all happened in the chamber that I belong to now. This chamber authorized the state to create this House of Reformation. And now these 100 odd years later, as a young African-American man, I'm representing this community and trying to make sure that I bring light to the situation.
It really does give me the chills because, to your point, the efforts from this administration and others to literally whitewash history doesn't escape our notice. And this should make others hang their heads in shame that they neglected these boys, that they failed them, because, to your point, they were humans too, and they deserved the chance. And it also draws parallels because I saw that this was a privately run facility, right? And so it draws parallels for me to when we see privately run prison systems right now, privatized prisons, the treatment and conditions that there are there, as well as what's happening with these immigration facilities, right? That theoretically are supposed to be, open access to lawmakers to be able to see the conditions. But we also have privately run facilities that are being held as detention facilities for people that are being snatched off the streets. The parallels are eerily similar, in my opinion.
Eerily similar. And, although Maryland's getting it right in so many respects as it relates to Black excellence, the reality is that we are leading the nation when it comes to the auto charging of people of color, especially juveniles of color as adults in our prison system. And so we hope that out of this awareness of what happened during that time period, there can also be some substantial policy changes looking forward in our upcoming session that will ensure that we are no longer number 2 just behind Alabama in locking up young Black and brown men and young Black and brown women and putting them away into our prison system, because putting them in our prison system, it does not reduce recidivism. It does not. It puts them back in the pipeline to continue to be an offender over and over again. And so although we're getting it right in so many ways, it is an indictment against us as a state to be so full of Black excellence, to be locking up so many young Black men and women and putting them in our prison system. And so we're very hopeful that we can do something about that, and that because of this and the mass awareness that is now coming to this very unfortunate reality of what happened in that time period, people will be hungry to hear more about what we're doing to get it right now.
Before you and I part ways, I do want to kind of follow up on something that you said kind of broadly, which is you represent a district as that has some measure of red to it, right? That has some measure of Republican support for Trump and for the GOP. Kind of what are you hearing, though, from the constituents that you represent? Because it's been a bit of time. We now are on day 1 of a government shutdown, right? But it's been some time, though, since Trump has taken office in January of 2025. And I'm curious to know what they're telling you in terms of how they've been directly impacted by a lot of his policies.
Well, I believe people are now starting to realize that they are living and that we are all living in the 4 years that the majority asked for, and we're now reaping those consequences. The district I represent is heavily populated by government workers. I don't believe that we will yet be able to tell on the effects of this shutdown. We know they will be disastrous. We have an Air Force base that is located in Southern Maryland, where my district is. We have our economy that thrives on federal government workers because they commute to and fro every day. We have people that are offering essential services. And so I often find myself caught between a rock and a hard place. I'm in the community because they support me as a delegate, as a state rep in the General Assembly, because I'm pretty bipartisan when it comes to common sense issues that affect Marylanders of all walks of life, bread and butter issues. But then they vote their party when it comes to someone so consequential as a leader who right now is Donald J. Trump. And so I believe that we still have to just wait and see. I know we're in a position to do the best that we can to make our economy less reliant upon the federal administration. And, again, one thing I do hear, whether Republican or Democrat, is that people are hungry for younger leaders to rise up. People are hungry for the next generation. They're tired of men dying in office, women dying in office. And again, I don't come from a political dynasty or background. I didn't have a political godfather to crown me and to anoint me, but I worked hard and I knocked on doors. I heard the voters. I heard what their concerns were, issues that were at their kitchen table that they discussed. And so this is the hour for folks in my generation to really stand up and be the answer for the crisis and democracy that we're facing.
Maryland Delegate Jeffrie Long, Jr. It's good to see you, my friend. Thank you for letting us get a glimpse into not only the work that you're doing, but how exceptional and powerful Maryland is as a force to be reckoned with. I appreciate you very much.
Honored to be with you, Katie. Thank you again.
Thanks. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.